Welcome to Teal Talk, a podcast brought to you by the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. That's OAESV for short. We're your hosts, Taylor
and Lori.
In each episode, we speak with professionals in the field to dive deep into the intersectional issues that affect survivors in Ohio.
Before we begin, we want to give a content warning that we will be discussing sexual violence and other issues that may be upsetting and triggering. If you need help, please feel free to call our resource line at 888-886-8388 during regular business hours, or the Ohio Sexual Violence Helpline 24/7 at 844-644-6435. Please take care of yourself. Hello, and welcome to Teal Talk. I'm your host, Lori Hamami. I'm the Communications and Resource Coordinator at the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. My trusty sidekick / co-host, Taylor Ucker-Lauderman, will not be joining us today, so you just get to hear my voice for a half an hour. And I'm also joined by another OAESV staff member, coworker, office buddy. I'm here to tell you all about Stephanie B. Scalise. She is the managing attorney of our legal clinic, where she provides direct legal representation to survivors of non-intimate partner sexual violence. She is both a former prosecutor and defense attorney. She ran her own law firm for 6 years, focusing on domestic relations, juvenile law, and guardian ad litem work, protecting abused and neglected children. Stephanie previously served as the vice chair of the Cleveland Civilians Police Review Board and was a board member for Edwin's Leadership and Restaurant Institute. Stephanie is a graduate of the Case Western Reserve University School of Law, where she won the Hergen-Roeder Award for Trial Tactics and captained the International Moot Court Team. She holds a certificate in International Human Rights Law from the University of Oxford. She earned a BA from Wilson College and studied political science and history at Charles University in Prague. Stephanie lives with her husband, son, 8 chickens, and an enormous dog in Shaker Heights, Ohio. She enjoys gardening, cooking, and practicing yoga. Stephanie, I think you should have started the bio by mentioning you have 8 chickens.
It's probably the most interesting thing about me. I'm really glad to be here. I was looking forward to this all day long, and I'm so excited to finally get to chat with you about what we do together, because we have an office right across the hall, but we don't always actually get to see each other in action.
I feel like I need to mention that whenever I say Stephanie B. Scalise, the millennial in me is like the B is for Beatrice. If you're a Junie B. Jones, a reader, maybe you'll understand that reference.
The B is actually for Beatrice.
No way!
If you think the chickens are an odd quirk, I changed my name. I changed my middle name in probate court. So Beatrice was not the name I was born with, but it's my grandmother's name. And I took it to honor her. So that
oh my gosh.
That's why I have this kind of old-fashioned sounding name.
I love that. I did not expect that joke to go the direction it went, and I'm so happy.
Yeah, it's Beatrice.
Amazing. So today, what we have planned is to chat with you all about the OAESV Legal Clinic and all the work that you do to support survivors and our member programs throughout the state. Perhaps you can start by giving a little rundown about your role here and the clinic in general.
Oh, sure. I'd love to. I'm always excited to have an opportunity to talk about the clinic because I think that most people don't know we exist. And that's both within our industry and outside of it, right? People who are listening are probably familiar with what OAESV is, right? We're the coalition for the state of Ohio that provides technical assistance to usually rape crisis centers and domestic violence organizations. There's one in every state. But most states do not have their own legal clinic as part of their work. So Ohio is very unique. I think there's 3 or 5, less than the fingers on my hand. This is the last I checked. But the reason that we have this legal clinic, the reason the clinic exists, is because Ohio has so many rural pockets that currently do not have the services of a rape crisis center and don't have a lot of attorneys who are trained to provide trauma-informed care to survivors of sexual violence. And so I have to give major props to the leadership of this organization who saw that need and took on the great task of building an in-house legal clinic to meet that need. That is no small task at all. When I was, I had been an attorney for about 6 or 7 years when I decided to start my own small firm. And I remember just me alone, how hard it was to start up from scratch and to have a nonprofit take on that same type of challenge without the history of having been a lawyer somewhere else first, I think is really telling to the commitment of the people who are here and in leadership. And I was not here for that foundation, but I feel like I came in 2 years ago and inherited a wonderful, fantastic starting point and was able to hit the ground running because of that work. So right now we consist of 2 attorneys. Caitlin Benzo is our other attorney who works here. And of course, we're also very fortunate to have a wonderful director who kind of leads the ship for us. That's Becca Getson. And she not only has a JD, but also has a huge wealth of history of being an advocate herself. And she's just so uniquely in a good position to lead us. Pretty decent team, I'd like to say. And we're lucky to have assistance outside of just the legal field. So we also enjoy the services of an in-house advocate. Shelby Lieber handles advocacy for clients who don't have advocates themselves already when they come to us. The work we do as a legal clinic is basically a one-stop shop, or at least that's our goal. So a survivor can come to our clinic at any point in what I think of as a recovery process. So the assault could have happened recent, or it could have been years ago, and we're just now ready to deal with it. And we try to holistically assess all of the legal needs that person has, and then figure out how we can meet each one of them so that they need not seek, a variety of attorneys, tell their story over and over again to different people. And so that's what we do.
I love everything that you said, and I feel so many questions swirling around in my head. I didn't realize, actually, that Ohio is unique in the way we have a clinic and that not every coalition has that arm. For states that do not have that, what options are there for survivors?
Well, my understanding in other states is that legal services are provided through the local rape crisis center. And so those organizations will have relationships with lawyers in their community and kind of work it that way. There are, of course, challenges in funding, challenges in training, and also, I think, challenges in quality control. And that's not to knock anybody who's doing good work at all, but there's not a lot of accountability in that type of a system. Whereas here at OAESV, we can recruit other attorneys who can work on a panel with us. We kind of have set a standard of what good training for attorneys looks like who are doing this type of work. And it gives us, I hope, a better legal product and a better experience for survivors in our state.
When you consider all of the scary and negative emotions that can come with pursuing the legal system, especially for a survivor in a field that could possibly be filled with victim blaming if an attorney isn't trained properly, can you share a little bit about what the training process looks like in Ohio for attorneys, or if there even is one?
Unfortunately, there's not. For the average lawyer, we don't get training on that. So for any lawyer, you go to 3 years of law school where you read case law. And if you're fortunate like me, you get to do some work with clients while you're still a student and do some intern work. Clinics are kind of the standard so that you're providing some type of legal services during your 3rd year as a student. As far as I know, the vast majority of law schools do not have classes about trauma-informed provision of services. And there's not a lot of classes about mental health. There's not a lot of classes about, it sounds pejorative to use the phrase hand-holding, but in a work that is so fully directed at cleaning up people's messes, I think there should be a lot more training about how to deal with people who have messes, right? We all do in some form or another, but it's so easy when you've spent 3 years buried in books to lose that personal touch. And for the average sexual assault survivor, the general experience is that this awful thing has happened. And then right away, you may or may not be speaking with law enforcement, and they're getting better in terms of their training and how to work with people. But that's not been known to be the most wonderful experience. And then you may be speaking with a prosecutor. You might be speaking with advocates. You might be looking for assistance from the medical community. And understand that in order for all of those professionals to do their job ethically and responsibly, they have to ask probing questions to better understand what happened. And if you're law enforcement and if you're the prosecutor, you also have to ask questions to kind of test memory, test perception, test accuracy. It's part of the job. It can feel, if you're on the other end of that process, very aggressive, and it doesn't have to. So a lot of the training that we try to provide in terms of helping lawyers and other professionals too have more of a trauma-informed approach. It's not just asking the questions, but it's how you ask them. And it's the amount of time that you give someone to process the question and respond. And there are always the biases that we all have that kind of come to the surface and are more visible than maybe sometimes we think. We have to be aware of those and be honest about those. The other thing I think is super, super important, and it's kind of a soapbox issue for me, is the options and the choices. And I think of it this way. If someone is a survivor of sexual assault, what really has been taken from them is the choice about something so intimate and personal and important, and something that's such a unquestionable right. So then if everything that happens after that also includes no choices at all, well, the experience is terrible. But if we can come in and we can find places where there are choices to be made and point them out and highlight them. So maybe you don't get to choose whether or not your case is prosecuted. That's out of your hands. You can't control that. But you can decide whether or not you talk to law enforcement in the first place. You can decide if you want to do a second interview after the first one. You can decide whether you want to meet with your prosecutor or say, I did my police report, I'm done. You can decide whether or not we go to court today or not. There are consequences to those choices. I'll do my best to educate you and tell you about the risks associated with your choices. But I really go out of my way to present to my clients, this is a choice for you to make. That one change of how you present the situation to someone can really make the difference in how they feel about restoration of control and predictability to the rest of their experience. And I find that that's something that's missing from the system right now.
I love how you're really emphasizing that you can still do a job well done, and you can take the lessons that you've learned through law school, and just by shifting the language slightly and practicing a little bit of empathy, you can really transform the experience that a survivor is having in the moment.
If you're a sexual assault survivor, what control do you have throughout this process? The answer is, unfortunately, very little. So if I, as your lawyer, can start giving you choices where I can, something as simple as, do you want to sit in this lobby where there's tons of people walking around, or can I give you a choice to sit somewhere quiet and private? Every little time I can give that person a choice, I restore the overall amount of control that you have had, even if it's over little things. The principle applies to children and adults, and really to everybody in the human experience. We all just want to have a say in what happens to us. So if your lawyer can kind of restore some of that, I think it helps.
I definitely agree. You've obviously shared that a common problem that survivors face in the legal system is navigating the concept of choice, having it, not having it. Can you share some other legal problems that survivors of sexual violence face and how the OAESV Legal Clinic helps?
Oh, absolutely. So I think the average person has seen so much Law and Order and Criminal Intent and, the TV shows, right? Myself included. The culture and the art around us shapes how we perceive reality. And so I think most of us share this perception that after sexual assault, everything you're going to deal with is about law enforcement and the criminal justice system. And that can be a big lift. So our clinic will represent survivors using recently passed Marsy's Law, which is a part of the Ohio State Constitution that outlines victim rights. And we'll use that as a tool to help give clients as much control as they can over the criminal justice process. And we also try to work as much as is possible as a partner with prosecutors. So I offer to assist them in any type of preparations that they might need. If they have motions that are pending that are in the benefit of the survivor, I'll also offer to assist with research that might help bolster their argument. And that also has its limitations, of course. If survivors want something completely different than a prosecutor does, well, then we might be arguing, and that's okay too, because lawyers do both. So there's the criminal element of their situation that we kind of put ourselves into as much as we can and try to act as consistent and hopefully diplomatic advocates in that process. But what you don't see in those types of television shows and the books we read is all the other legal needs that a survivor faces. It can be something like seeking a civil protection order. If the case has not been prosecuted, if it was decided there just wasn't enough evidence and the police and the prosecutors aren't going to pursue it, well, the perpetrator is still out there and you might not feel safe about that. So we offer to evaluate the circumstances and determine whether or not filing for a civil protection order is appropriate and assist with that process. If you're a student and the person who assaulted you is also a student, or we've had it happen, professors or staff at a school, we will work with them through the federal Title IX process. Title IX is originally a process that's intended to keep people from being discriminated against within educational systems. So any educational facility or school that accepts federal funding, which is all of them, there's no school that doesn't have at least a nickel of federal money. So that's how they hook them in. They are required to have these processes and protections in place to ensure that every student, regardless of their protected status of being a particular gender or racial minority, they are supposed to have certain protections to ensure that they can equally participate and have access in the educational community and the benefits thereof. So things like sports and extracurriculars, that all falls under Title IX as well. It's intended to benefit people based on gender when it comes to sexual harassment and sex discrimination and sexual violence, with the thought that women tend to be more often the survivors of those acts. But men certainly can use this exact same process when they are survivors as well. It's a process that came to address a problem, but is a benefit for everyone, so to speak. So if you're a student and someone in your educational community has perpetrated an act of sexual violence against you, we will work with you to notify the school and work through the school's own administrative investigatory process. And they do an investigation as well as a hearing and an adjudication. And it's totally intended to say, did this person violate the school's policies? And if so, what will the consequence be? Expulsion is the worst that can happen, but certainly it can be lesser. You can be suspended or you can be not allowed to play on a sports team. But it's really important for people to understand that that is completely a school process. It is separate from any law enforcement process, and it's very different from being in court. The rules of evidence don't apply at the hearings, hearsay is allowed in. It's very weird to not have the rules that you're used to having. So we assist with Title IX for students to try to help them feel safe. And some other things that I think people really don't think about are things like family law, adoptions, name changes. Changing your name through probate court can be a really powerful way to take back your personhood and part of your recovery. And I think that's something people don't think about. If your children were molested by their father, well, maybe we can pursue an adoption and the person that you're currently married to could be their father and provide a consistent, lifelong adult parental connection for them instead. People who have been evicted from their homes by a landlord who discriminated against them because they were sexual assault survivors. We've had people who were subject to eviction process because they essentially reported a sexual assault by someone who was down the hall, and the landlord didn't want any of them living there anymore. And so it's, whoa, you can't discriminate against someone for that. The only caveat I will add for our legal services is that we are not allowed to do civil litigation is a very broad topic. So we do civil litigation, but what we can't do is anything that would involve money damages. So we aren't going to sue the offender for you. That, unfortunately, is something that the government funding for our clinic would, of course, not pay for. Did that fully answer your question?
Yes. I just let you go.
No, that's a problem. I'll never stop.
That was really, really helpful, especially because we started this episode by you saying a lot of people probably don't even know this clinic exists. All the ways that you listed are ways in which our member programs can be assisted. So what does the process look like for programs who want to reach out?
So we try to make sure that we are equal access for people who have the benefit of having a local rape crisis center or member program assisting them. And also, if you don't have that assistance, can you still find us? So that's kind of been an ongoing conversation, is making sure we have equal access. So whether you're coming through a member or you're working on your own, the OAESV website is your first start. And then you kind of navigate to the legal services portion of the website when you go under like what we do. And then the application is online. Once you fill out that initial application, you'll get an email that follows up to say, can you sign some of these forms? And the forms are basically giving us permission to speak about your case with one another, kind of some confidentiality information, and also letting you know that if you are going to be one of our clients, there's an agreement here. So we will represent you for free. But on the other side of things, we need you to communicate with us. We need you to help us by giving us the documents that we might need to work on your case. Disclosures are sent out. And then once that's signed and sent back, we as a team will review the application, decide if this is something we can assist with. If we can't, we try to figure out, alternative ways to help. Thankfully, that does not happen often. And then we get started on working with that client one-on-one. If the client has come to us through a member program, they typically will already have an advocate who's assisting them with the application and assisting them in getting those forms signed and returned. That's the ideal, right? That's golden when you don't have to do it by yourself. But if you are in a situation where you don't have the assistance of an advocate, but you want legal services, well, it's not the end of the world, because we have Shelby Lieber, our advocate who works here, and she's a powerhouse. She will get right in there and assist as well. So it's really just a matter of reaching out to us online. For those who have trouble with accessing things online, we certainly can make exceptions and workarounds. You just have to contact our clinic. Our phone number is 216-282-1559. And that's just the general line for our legal clinic, and someone can always assist you and point you in the right direction that way as well. And then in addition to that, we have virtual office hours. Those are special times in which people can call in for brief advice. So that's not, you have a major ongoing litigation. It's just, I want to talk to a lawyer to ask some more basic questions and to look for education. We always have an attorney hanging out at their desk during those hours. And that time is set aside for us to provide general legal services to the public as they call in. And sometimes we will talk to somebody who turns out they need a little more help, and then we'll direct them to the application.
And that's also a place where advocates can call and ask questions about legal services too, right?
Yes. And I really would love to see that service being used more by advocates. We have so much information that we'd like to share, and providing that type of support. I can help one client, or I can educate a whole bunch of other people about something, and then they go and help all those clients. So the wider I cast a net, the better it is for all Ohioans. One other thing that I would want to also make sure listeners know about is that we do have a panel process for attorneys who, maybe this isn't their full-time commitment, but they're looking to do maybe pro bono cases here and there. A lot of law firms will encourage their associates to do some pro bono cases. Pro bono means representation for free. We also do have a program that will allow attorneys to contract with us. You're not going to be paid the hourly rate that you might make for a private client. It's a reduced rate, but you will be paid for that work. both of those opportunities come with the opportunity to have training from our legal clinic and to be able to call us for technical assistance and advice as you're working those cases. So if you are a newer lawyer who wants more opportunities to be in court and to be working with clients one-on-one, if you're an older lawyer who's winding back your practice, but you don't want to give up your license, you don't want to entirely stop, hey, we've got work for you. And, anyone in between who just wants to do good work with that law degree that they've got, we'll take it. We'll take you. So, contacting our clinic and reaching out about that is fantastic because we can, kind of work with you to meet you where you are in your profession and help you serve sexual assault survivors and really providing those legal services that can make you feel really good about how you're using your law degree. For what it's worth, my pitch on that is to say that I never have the Sunday scaries. I never think, oh man, on Monday I got to go back in there and do that work where I help people. What a terrible job that is. Like, I'm just so lucky for that. And I think that being a lawyer can be extremely stressful. It almost always is. It can feel very unfulfilling depending on what type of law you practice. This can be a way to enhance the feel-good part of your career. And I hope that more of my colleagues will come take me up on that offer.
Yes, come to our side. So to wrap it up, obviously you can't share specifics, but I'm wondering, as you think back to all the times you've been in court or answered the virtual office hours phone, has there been a repeat question or scenario and you go home at night and you're like, man, people really still don't know this and I wish they did?
Oh, that is such a good question. And I feel like that could be the topic of a book.
Yeah. Definitely.
Let's see. Things that I wish people knew. The first thing is I think that a lot of people don't understand that in a criminal justice process, the prosecutor represents the community. Crime is thought of in the legal world as a violation of a community's standards. And so the prosecutor's job as an elected official here in Ohio is to represent the offense against the community and what will it take for the community to be restored. And that can sometimes completely fall in line with what a victim needs to feel that they've also had justice. But sometimes those don't overlap or they aren't exactly the same. I think many survivors are shocked to find that out. I'm a former prosecutor, and when I had that job, there were times where I had to explain that to make sure that people had a realistic expectation of what my work could and could not be for them. And so I think that that's a common misconception that I wish more people realized. And that's not to vilify prosecutors one bit. I think that if prosecutors get confused and start trying to represent victims, they actually have more ethical problems to be worried about. Our system only works when each lawyer in that courtroom is doing their job, that stay in your lane concept. And so I'm a big proponent of that's why there needs to be a lane for a victim's attorney. That's a new emerging area of law that is happening in our state, and it's good to see. The other thing I would say, I think that a lot of adults that I find working with child sexual assault survivors are so furious and so upset that they frequently rush in to solve these problems in the way that they think is right. And a child can feel like their own voice and their own goals are lost in that process. And so I'm a big advocate in putting kids, even though they're children, putting them back in the driver's seat as much as you can. We don't force children to testify if they don't want to. We don't force children to report to law enforcement if they don't want to. That, kind of old-fashioned way of parenting where we tell our children this is what's going to happen because I'm your mom or else. It's falling out of favor to parent children that way, and it certainly is out of favor to be a lawyer for children that way. Children cannot recover long-term into adulthood from their trauma if the response to their trauma is that someone else is going to make a bunch of decisions for them. Those are my two key pieces of insight.
It always ties back to choice and consent.
Yeah, it really does. Consent is about a lot more than just sex. Consent is about how we connect to other people, how we trust other people, and how we think about the predictability of the community that we operate and live in. And so if you can't have an idea of predictability and consent in your daily life, it can be a lot harder to recover from what really is one incident of not having that consent. It's important to restore that for people.
I don't think I could have ended this episode any better, Stephanie. That was so beautiful.
Thanks. I give closing arguments for a living.
You're full of the jokes over there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I will be sure to include all the information about the legal clinic and the virtual office hours in the show notes. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for listening to Teal Talk. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into intersectional issues affecting survivors in Ohio. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and review, recommend us to a friend, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at OAESV and Twitter at Ohio Alliance ESV. If you'd like to learn more about us and the services we offer, sign up for our email list, or read a transcript of this episode, visit oaesv.org.
Want to share a comment or ask a question for a future episode? Just click on the link in the show notes to leave us a voicemail. And remember, we're here to help. Feel free to call our resource line at 888-886-8388 during regular business hours, or the Ohio Sexual Violence Helpline 24/7 at 844-644-6435. See you next time.